Hello everybody and welcome to another video about Dwarf Fortress. This one isn't really news, but it's kind of something that I've wanted to do for a little while. I want to talk about the Dwarf Fortress UI. You know, it's legendary for being bad, legendary for being obtuse, and well known as generally disliked by the greater public. I personally don't think it's that bad. I think it's just poorly organized and a little bit messy. But what I really want to do right now is talk about speculation and what we know so far about the Steam version's UI, based on screenshots and things that Tarn has said in interviews and events. Going forward, I kind of would like to, obviously start this video off with, I'm a defender of the traditional UI. Here's a screenshot of how I have it set up. And I personally think that it's quite usable once you know it. Yes, there's a learning curve to it because it's mostly keyboard driven. Some of the menus have mouse support, oddly enough. Because it's mostly keyboard and hotkey driven, it takes a little while to learn everything. But the way the buttons are laid out is actually pretty similar to modern UI. With a few improvements, I think that the current UI could be quite usable. Granted, it does definitely need those improvements, and I completely agree with people who have problems with it. But before I say anything else, I'm just going to let Toady1 say a few things about the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress. The footage that you're about to see was taken from a panel back last year at PAX West. I was actually at this panel and got to listen to them talk, and it was quite interesting. Here's a little bit about the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress, and then we'll talk more about the screenshots that have been released. If you'd like to watch the full panel, the link will be in the description.
I'm Tarn. I work on Dwarf Fortress with my brother Zach, and yes, coming to Steam in sometime next year. But yeah, with new graphics and things, so you can actually play it for once.
You want to talk a little bit about the Steam release and how it's done?
Yeah. So sometime hopefully next year, we've got our modders together. We got some of them to help us make graphics for the game, and yeah, that's basically the half the story. The rest is about usability. If everyone's ever tried to play this game, the interface is terrible. That little sidebar on the right is still a remnant of the former interface, and so things like mouse support, possibly tutorials, that kind of thing, to actually help people so they won't have to ask everybody for help all the time, just nice. Most of the time instead.
As you can see in this clip, he even apologizes for the quality of the UI, saying that it is terrible. Once again, I don't think it's actually that bad. So here's why I think it's not actually that bad. The structure of the UI is pretty simple. It's a selection of options in the initial UI, which you can see right here on the screen, and then a selection of side menus. Every single button and piece of UI that you need is right here. Now, this completely vanilla version of the game shows all of the information that you will need in order to build and create the fortress of your dreams. Adventure mode UX is, in my opinion, a little bit messier and more obtuse, just because not everything is explained as clearly as in fortress mode, so I will be avoiding that for the portion of this video. Also because we don't currently know what the adventure mode UX is going to look like for the Steam version, I don't see covering that as particularly helpful in this case. Unfortunately, all of the screenshots that we have of the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress are a little bit out of date, as they were released roughly a year ago. However, I can take what we do have and compare them with the old UI. Keep in mind, the new UI will feature features that Toady mentioned, such as mouse support, and I'm assuming things like button highlighting when you hover over them with your mouse. They've also discussed things on the forums, such as context-sensitive menus and radial menus that you can use to pick things up. Now, a lot of this is speculation, so I will do my best to be specific about what is speculative and what is confirmed. And there you have it. There is a side-by-side of the new and the old. On the right, you have what is a mock-up of the Steam version of the UI, and on the left, you have the OG UI. Now, the OG UI, you'll notice, is very crumpled up and pushed up to the top of the screen. This is because the default resolution for Dwarf Fortress is tiny, and it doesn't adjust the UI based on the size of your screen, which is why some screens, like the one I'm going to show on the screen right now, the military screen in vanilla, is quite small, especially if you're playing on a bigger resolution. The way the Dwarf Fortress UI works is it is a flat tree structure. So you have a selection of different menus, let's just say the building menu, and then you select the building menu and it moves you to a set of options for buildings. Now, where Dwarf Fortress becomes overwhelming for most people is generally when the way a game works is it'll give you a couple of items and options and then hold your hand as you move through a slowly broadening selection of options for gameplay. So this is usually done with an upgrade tree, or leveling up, or progressing through a game in some form or fashion. Dwarf Fortress doesn't do that. Dwarf Fortress gives you all of your options at the front, which makes the game quite daunting. I genuinely believe that if the game had some sort of research structure, a lot of people would be less imposed by it. Granted, the lack of graphics is definitely not helping. So with the Steam version, I don't believe they're going to do anything different structure-wise. I feel like they're still just going to give you everything, and I think it would actually kind of ruin Dwarf Fortress in a way if they did add in some sort of research tree. But I digress. The only thing that they're really doing different, at least from these mock-ups, is organization. I'm not going to tell you if you're completely convinced that you're never going to get into Dwarf Fortress because of the look of the current UI. If you've made your mind up on that, that's fine. But going forward and just being completely blunt with you guys, I do really hope that the tutorial structure is something similar to what RimWorld has. RimWorld has a pretty good tutorial. The way it works is you click on the tutorial and it boots you directly into a map, and then you have the option to keep playing once you have finished the selection of pop-ups where it gives you a brief tour of the UI. Something else I really hope that Toadie implements is I hope that there is a pre-generated world so that you don't have to go through the world generation screen. Not that the world generation screen is particularly difficult to comprehend, it's just hard to explain to a new player that they might be waiting there for a very long time, depending on the options that they set. At the very least, I hope that there's some expanded tooltips in the world generation menu for first-time players. Now here's a screenshot of RimWorld, and you might be thinking, Blind, why are you showing this in a Dwarf Fortress video? Well, I hear a lot of people saying, I want Dwarf Fortress's UX to look like this. But I will just simply state, in my opinion, Dwarf Fortress's UI gives you just as much information as this UI right here. The default UI tells you every single option that you need to click in order to find every single menu in the game. Right here, although admittedly I have some mods running, you can see every single menu in the game. Except instead of hitting A, B, C, D, E, or F, or G on the keyboard, you are hitting one of these buttons. Now, does that make the game easier necessarily because you're just simply clicking things instead of hitting keys on your keyboard? Yes, in a way, especially for people that have disabilities. Maybe you can't use a mouse, maybe you can't use your keyboard and you can only use a mouse. Yes, that is fair. Dwarf Fortress also has some context-sensitive menus where at certain times you have to use UMKH to move around and make things bigger, where you have to hit up and down, plus and minus on the numpad, or use different keys on the keyboard that you're not used to using, or things that are capitalized. And yes, that there is definitely a learning curve to that. But once Dwarf Fortress has mouse support, I don't think that those menus are going to be anywhere near as terrifying or daunting for people, especially once, you can click on a slider to move up the priority number, or perhaps click and drag to make a wall longer, or draw something with your mouse even, instead of having to move around on the keyboard. For me, I'll probably still use the keyboard because honestly, it's faster. However, the barrier to entry with a very similar UI that's simply better executed is probably what's going to save Dwarf Fortress, or at the very least, expand it to a much wider, less hardcore audience. I do need to encourage you, if you are new to the game and looking to get into it, maybe you've stumbled on this video, listen, the Dwarf Fortress community is extremely helpful, and we're willing and ready to help anybody learn the game. If you ever have any questions on my Discord, I have a room called Dwarf Fortress where you can just ask questions and someone will answer it hopefully pretty quickly. The Kid Fox Discord also has a room dedicated to Dwarf Fortress, which is admittedly a lot busier, but has just as knowledgeable a crowd. Kruggsmash's Discord as well, if you happen to be one of his patrons, is wonderful. So all I can say is the Steam version of the UI just needs to be a more organized, modern version of the original UI. It doesn't need to change that much. It really just needs some mouse support and a few context-sensitive menus. I just want to thank all my patrons for funding this video. If you're interested in supporting me or my content, I stream 6 days a week over on Twitch, twitch.tv/BLINDIRL, and I also create little news updates about Dwarf Fortress. If you would like to support me directly, I do have a Patreon, and you can see the people who funded this video right now. But seriously, what do you think about the Dwarf Fortress UI? Do you think it's any good? Do you think it's shite? Are you going to keep using the old version of Dwarf Fortress when the Steam version drops? I like having these discussions, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching.